Hello and welcome to On the Shoulders of Kali, a symposium in partnership with Central School of Speech and Drama. My name's Helena Bell and I'm the Artistic Director of Kali. For those of you that don't know us, Kali is a theatre company producing new plays by women of South Asian descent. We're an Arts Council funded national portfolio organisation and resident at the Albany in London. Each autumn we tour a fully produced new play, and each spring we present script development showcases. And in fact, we've just launched Discovery, Kali's writer development programme, which finds and develops aspiring new playwrights across the UK. This year we're delighted to be working in partnership with Leeds Playhouse, Oldham Coliseum and London's Hampstead Theatre. Our Home Festival programme for mid-career writers is also now going ahead after several COVID postponements. Home will showcase 6 striking contemporary new plays at Tara Theatre from October the 11th to the 16th. Do come along. Further ahead in 2022, we'll be launching an international festival with writers from India, Europe, the UK and the States. This will be followed by a full UK tour of Nor by Asma Dar. Future plans include a training scheme for aspiring dramaturgs and summer schools to inspire more Asian actors to enter the industry. But now back to this afternoon. So it's Kali's 30th birthday, and we wanted to share the exciting news that Methuen have just published our new birthday book, 30, which features 30 monologues and duologues for South Asian actors from plays we've produced over the last 30 years. We're massively proud of our writers, and today we want to celebrate you all and ask the question, what more is there still to do to achieve parity? This afternoon's guests discuss both the wider landscape for women writers 30 years ago and also look at how the industry is currently working for our writers now. How much have things changed? What else is there still to do? We'll conclude with breakout rooms for your contributions. We've commissioned a report on today's discussions, which we hope will assist change and help make it more possible for South Asian artists to both survive and thrive in the theatre industry and beyond. Finally, thank you to partner venues and your nominated writer delegates. We hugely appreciate your support for this initiative. That's Bradford's Freedom Studios, Hampstead Theatre, Leeds Playhouse, Leicester Curve, Oldham Coliseum, Pleasance Theatre, Queen's Theatre Hornchurch, Royal Exchange Manchester, Tara Theatre London. So now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce the inspirational Josette Bushell-Mingo, award-winning actor, writer and director, and now incoming principal of Central School of Speech and Drama. Josette, thank you so much for joining us live from Sweden. I'm delighted to now hand over to you for your welcome address.
Thank you so much, Helena. It's lovely to see you again. And I'm a little nervous, actually, I must say. What a day it is, 30 years. First of all, how proud I am to be that this is one of my first public addresses, really. And you've summed up so well. I have to start by a huge congratulations to everyone at Kali Theatre. What an achievement. I think it's an extraordinary moment, particularly in the days that we've been living in, to look back at who we are and to understand where we are, but then, of course, to understand where we're going to go. And we know and believe that the arts are crucial to who we are as human beings. For me, one of the driving factors of my work as an artist has always been the idea that art is a tool of change, giving us voice, giving us power, giving us identity and history and memory. One of the things I believe that Kali Theatre has done, and when I look at the book and I see the date, which is 1991, I believe, I myself was one of the first women of African descent to enter the Royal Shakespeare Company. That's where we were then. Kali Theatre for me also represents not only the creativity of South Asian women playwrights, but also for me, a symbol for all of us in terms of courage and even in the face of struggle, because I believe that it has cost you also to be where you are today. that you've still managed after all this time to come forward with such joy and love and creativity and power. I hope to take some of these central values into my work as the principal at Central. The idea that I hope, of course, is to place central inclusion and diversity. And to do that, you need maps. To do that, you need guidance. And Kali Theatre will be one of those. That book, which I'm really jealous about because I don't have a copy, means that I definitely have to arrive in London from the 16th of August when I pick up my post and take one of those copies with me. That'll be the first thing I'll be doing. But I also look forward to our continued relationship, to all at Kali Theatre, that you'll be a close partner with us when I take the values of inclusion and diversity and expanding out those who have access to the arts as quickly and as fast as I can. I think one of the other important things, of course, is just hearing the expanse of your program coming out. And I hope that everybody here in today's symposium will be part of the ongoing work of Kali Theatre and making sure that that reach out also reaches back. You will help me, as you will so many others, to strengthen our commitment to our community, to strengthen our commitment to our society overall, and to strengthen our commitment to the human right to be able to create. Therefore, I wish you great, great success here in this symposium ahead. I look forward and say congratulations once again to Kali Theatre and everything that you've achieved. Thank you. And I look forward to speaking with you, Helena, and everyone there, to continuing onwards. Have a great, great symposium. Happy birthday. Happy birthday. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Josette, for that wonderful welcome. So wonderful. Thank you. I'm now thrilled to announce the opening of our brand new Kali script shop. This can be accessed via our website, and you can buy copies of nearly every script we've produced. We hope this will be a useful resource for students, actors, writers and directors everywhere. You can also buy 30 at the bookshop, at the script shop. And as delegates here today, if you use the code SHOULDERS, you can get 20% off the cover price. So it will be yours for just £12. To whet your appetite for 30, we'll be sharing 3 extracts throughout the afternoon. Here's the first one from River on Fire by Rukhsana Ahmad, performed and recorded by the legendary Shelley King.
So, it comes closer to the moment of truth. I might be able to tell you soon who waits across the river. God or Ram or Allah or just some dull neutrons and protons whizzing around in silence. I must say, heaven sounds very nice right now. Bombay's been such a hellhole since December when they pulled that mosque down at Ayodhya. All the Muslims came out in protest, even the ones who never cared to step inside one. It's been dreadful. Sometimes I wish I'd been born into a nice middle-class English family. Life's so much easier in England. They hardly ever fight over religion. Not these days. And no one would dream of shouting death to the traitor like some Muslims do if a fellow believer decides to opt out of the faith. That really bothers me. Why should your birth determine your faith? Can any of you see the point of that? If I were God, I would rather have my worshippers choose me. Pick your moment, I'd say to them. Confirmation, bar mitzvah, initiation, bismillah, navjot. However your elders describe it, and choose me yourself, or turn away from me, if you will. But Don't pray to me just because your forefathers did that before you. At least, that has been the logic of my life. I was born a Hindu and raised as one. I even married a Hindu and stayed married to him. Well, until I went back to university. That politicized me. I became an atheist and my marriage fell apart. My mother went to every shrine, every dargah, every temple in the whole of Rajasthan, making offerings, tying knots in threads, cutting deals with saints. It got worse. I fell in love with a Muslim. Bless him. I married him and became a Buddhist. And I stayed a Buddhist for several years until I came back in maturity to my old faith, atheism. Ooh, that sounds a wee bit scary right now. I've left it too late to worry about it, I reckon. We shall see how it goes.
I'm now honoured and delighted to introduce award-winning journalist, writer and broadcaster Samira Ahmed, who will give the symposium's keynote speech. Samira presents Front Row on Radio 4, Newswatch on BBC One and the podcast How I Found My Voice. Her BBC 4 series Art of Persia was the first major Western documentary to be filmed in Iran for 40 years. She was named British Broadcasting Press Guild Audio Presenter of the Year 2020. Thanks so much for joining us, Samira.
Helena, thank you very much. And I'll just go for it, shall I? So where were we 30 years ago? I was thinking 30 years ago, it was about 30 years since my own parents' generation had first come to Britain from the subcontinent. And in my own career 30 years ago, I'd recently started work at the BBC as a news trainee, all of us on the same salary. I assumed that all these issues had been sorted. There might still be, well, teething problems is the wrong word for it, but essentially the big issues around the place of women, around the place of people of colour in Britain had been fixed. 4 years later, riots in Bradford took me as much as the government by surprise. I went to make a film there among the Muslim community for TV news, and I realised how fractured things had become, how class intertwined with racism, misogyny, and an entrenched patriarchal culture had nurtured a complex social situation, what we still call the left behind. I met men in their 40s who said they were still regarded as youths compared to the elders who ran things. The informal youth club of local boys played cricket on ground that literally was not a level playing field. It was a gift to my script. Afterwards, I got a herogram, a handwritten note from the then head of BBC News, Tony Hall, thanking me for helping BBC News reflect from the grassroots a fuller picture of British life and issues. But all along, something bothered me. I hadn't managed to interview one woman in my film. It was partly about time pressure, but it was also symptomatic of the absence of Asian women's voices more broadly in the national conversation. However, there were always these remarkable writers and performers, particularly theatre makers, who were confronting all these issues through art. They, you, as I know so many of you are here, found each other and have supported each other, notably through organisations such as the Asian Women Writers Workshop, now Collective, formed in 1984. In the 80s, I had discovered the Silver Moon Women's Bookshop on the Charing Cross Road and devoured the new novels coming from the women's press in particular. Writers such as Ravinda Randhawa, A Wicked Old Woman, was one of the first of those novels that I found and loved. one of the founders of the workshop, of course. And Rita Wolf, another founder. I watched her on screen, thrilled by her intelligent and witty, if all too brief presence in films such as My Beautiful Laundrette. How I wished for more films that would centre women's experiences, not just male experiences, and make more of all these talented writers and actresses. Over the years, I've watched such names flourish and create work for themselves, instead of waiting for crumbs from the table. Rukhsana Ahmad, Meera Syal, Kanika Gupta, who was on front row only last night to talk about her terrific new play, The Overseas Student. Satinder Chauhan, who I was lucky enough to work with on my Channel 4 documentary series, Islam Unveiled, back in 2002. There's been Tamasha, Indu Rubasingam's outstanding work now, as well as before, at Kiln Theatre. It's a good moment to reflect on the power of all of you just getting on and writing the stories we want to tell and see shared. Kali has, of course, been filling that big gap. The gap that I, early in my career, found so hard to overcome in news. The gap between those men who claim to speak for us as British Asians and the challenge of speaking about ourselves as women and our own unique experiences as British Asian women, when too often speaking honestly can be seen as betraying one's community. My mother, actress Leeds Ahmed, has provided an unexpected window into how things were changing, as she played mother to a range of up-and-coming actors in new commissions, and would come home to tell me about these wonderful young people, Naveen Andrews, Sarita Chowdhury in Wild West. We laughed at my mum playing supposedly devout and conservative parents, given the way the action of that film went. Mum, she's not watching, but if you were, if we had ever hidden a boyfriend or girlfriend under the bed, you would have flipped out. One day she came home raving about two remarkable young women, Meera Syal, who'd written a script called Pudgy on the Beach, and Gurinder Chadha, the director. She shared stories of the cast, the multi-generational busload of girls and women, the late great Zora Sehgal, who performed in some of the earliest episodes of Doctor Who, such as the now lost Marco Polo storyline of William Hartnell. And they shared stories together of building a career against the expectations of family and community. We see it now much more, don't we, about exploring British history, but there's long been actresses and writers of South Asian heritage making their way and making a living. I think of Aisha Bruff, who turned up in everything from UFO, the Jerry and Sylvia Anderson science fiction series, to hosting Liftoff on ITV in the early 70s, the after-school pop show, and introducing David Bowie to a generation of British children. Sadly, many of those tapes are lost, but I can't help thinking there are stories within these stories waiting to be told. I went on to make my own documentary, I Dressed Ziggy Stardust, for Radio 4 in about 2013. It was about the British Asian women who were influenced by David Bowie, including one child, a refugee from Uganda, who saw in him, and especially in androgynous Mark Bolan, the beauteous representations of Lord Krishna, so at ease with the milkmaids. It was also my own way to pay tribute to women who'd influenced me, the presenter Sharma Pereira most notably, with her dyed purple hair. And, of course, we reflected on how Bowie, by absorbing Asian influences like the Beatles before him, helped the children of immigrants like me appreciate our own parents' culture. So we all know how many rich stories there are out there. With Sudha Butcher, I've been to St. George's Hospital to watch a piece inspired by the patients and medical staff dealing with heart conditions. In more recent years, I've been fortunate through my work on Front Row to spend time in rehearsal and conversation, watching the performances of theatre makers all around the UK, meeting Kumiko Mendel when what is now New Earth Theatre Company opened up New Thinking for Me, their production of Tamburlaine, challenging the 16th century idea of the Central Asian warlord presented by Christopher Marlowe. More recently, when I went to Iran to film Art of Persia, I got to see a rare 14th century Timurid Shahnameh, an illuminated manuscript of Ferdowsi's epic poem, The Book of Kings, commissioned by Tamburlaine's grandchildren, whose dynasty ruled Persia after his conquests. They had all become aesthetes with a love of poetry. There seemed a satisfying artistic conclusion in that. There have been shocking moments too that we should reflect on. In 2004, I remember well the threats and the violent attack at the Birmingham Rep Theatre, staging Besti, Gurpreet Kaur Bhatti's important play about abuse within the Sikh community. And, crucially, the the total failure of the theatre and the police then to stand up to the bullies and to defend a writer, a woman, and artistic freedom of speech. Presenting Channel 4 News that weekend, I found myself interviewing one of the leaders of the disruption, one of the male elders of the Sikh community, and I realised how nothing had changed, how women always faced additional danger and threat and career damage because they speak as women, because they are women. Reading the Kali anthology of monologues and duologues, which I have, almost in one sitting, I have to say, I was so excited. I was thrilled to see the fearless range of stories being told. Some were harrowing, but all were strong, about prostituted women in Pakistan, about women with learning difficulties, a view of the Colston statue from the perspective of Caribbean Asian descendants of indentured labourers, sassy young women who talk back, survivors of forced marriages and so-called honour-based violence, women of biracial heritage, mothers, daughters and sisters of drug addicts trying to hold their family together. Many of the works in this anthology have responded to the challenges of lockdown, and I know we need to tell the stories that reflect on the terrible cost borne by the South Asian community in terms of death and long-term illness, the health workers on the NHS front line. Talking to Mira Sael for my podcast a few months ago, I was struck by her observation about how now, still, there can be a blinkered vision by big commissioning powers in how they see stories. Three Girls, the drama about the sexual grooming gangs in Rochdale, could have made a feature of the role of Nazir Afzal, the real chief prosecutor for the North West, who'd broken the silence of the police, of the local council and of community elders to bring the abusers to justice, a powerful and true balance to the criminals, but the producers and writers didn't think to. Comparisons with the 80s have been made over the past 2 years, and they've been on my mind, especially in thinking about today. A Conservative government with a new ideological drive, remember Clause 28, a focus on being tough on immigration, a sense of battle with a lefty cultural community and industry. However, the central and local government funding of the arts then was far greater. It was possible to live on the dole. The Britpop generation of musicians was the result. Many of these funding certainties have disappeared, along with the arrival of mass student debt thanks to tuition fees, first introduced by New Labour, of course. But then as now, there are arts bodies trying to fund all the rich stories out there. I know many of you have benefited from them. It's worth taking a moment to reflect on how normalised that's become now since the early days of Film 4 and Channel 4, alongside local authorities and the Arts Council. That's a positive thing. Until its 1986 abolition, the GLC in London was a leading pioneer in supporting grassroots women's groups, especially those representing lesbian and bisexual women and women of colour. And in fact, I dug out this poster I kept from that era. It's from a bit after, it's from 1988. I'll hold it up for a sec. And it's an anti-apartheid poster. It's the 2 years for the end of apartheid, and it says, African women equal partners in the struggle. Apartheid is racism as racism is apartheid. And it's just a reminder of how politically active local councils would be, and culture was tied up with global politics. So there is much to celebrate. Truth we know matters in art, and the pandemic has revealed how much we need art and culture and joy to feed our souls. Congratulations to Kali on 30 years. It's been an honour to be part of the day and reflect on how far you've all come. Thank you. Helena.
Thank you so much, Samira. That was so inspirational. A wonderful keynote speech. Thank you. So now it's time to move on to our first panel, 30 years ago, The Wider Struggle, chaired by Rukhsana Ahmad. Rukhsana has written several acclaimed originals and adaptations for the stage, for BBC's Radio 4 and World Service Drama. She was lead writer for a World Service Trust drama series in Urdu about forced marriages, and has also written 2 full-length screenplays. Rukhsana co-founded Kali with Rita Wolf and was the artistic director who led us into revenue funding in 2002. So over to you and your panel, Rukhsana. Thank you.
Thank you, Helena, for that wonderful introduction. This is an amazing day, I have to say. I feel both humbled, I feel excited, I feel overwhelmed. And it is a great pleasure and a huge privilege to be introducing a panel of women who are astonishing Please don't think of them as 30 years ago women. They're all alive and functioning. They're all kicking dust. And they will join me one by one. First of all, Patricia Kamper. Patricia Kamper's plays have been produced internationally. A collection of 3 was published by People Tree Press. She has worked extensively in radio on originals, series, adaptations, and abridgments. She's won the Raise in the Media Award, a Sony Silver, and most recently the BBC's Outstanding Contribution to Audio Drama. Bravo! She led Talaba Theatre Company from 2006 to 2012 and received an MBE for her contribution to British Black theatre. Kumiko Mendel. Kumiko Mendel has worked as an actor, director, producer, and teacher for more than 30 years. She's a founder member and artistic director of New Earth Theatre, formerly Yellow Earth Theatre, the UK's award-winning British East and Southeast Asian theatre company. She established a 2-year professional writers program to make a step change in their writing content and helped to set up New Earth Academy, the first summer school to get more of their actors on stage and screen. Her current project, Sunagu Connect, uncovers the lives of Japanese women in the UK. And finally, Sudha Butcher, who sadly won't be here in person, but has sent us a recorded message, which should be very interesting for all of you to watch, which is a lovely message. Sudha is an actor, playwright, and founder of Butcher Boulevard. With Christine Landon-Smith, who will be joining us later in panel 2, she co-founded Tamasha Theatre, renowned for its many productions. Acclaimed writing includes Child of the Divide, Asian Media Award 2018, My Name Is, and A Touchstone Tales. Acting credits include major productions for stage, TV, and film. She was a finalist in Radio 4's Audio Drama Awards 2019 for My Son the Doctor and Eastern Eyes Actor Award for contribution to the arts. Currently, Sudha's one-woman show, Evening Conversations, opens at German Street Theatre on 28 July, and Final Farewell opens at Tara Arts on 21st July. I hope you can see them all now on the screen. Yes, thank you. Now, it's my pleasure to say a few words, which I don't really feel very confident about, but here we go. I had to say something on this auspicious day, which makes me feel old, but not old enough to stop. So thank you, Helena. Thank you, Team Kali. You've done a great job, and this is a huge moment for me. I'll say how it was for me. It might sound random and obvious, but I hope it will contextualize where we are now. I think writing is a bit like solo flying. You're up there in the world of your imagination, making it all up. To write, you need your ego, your vision, your ideas, your story. But to make theatre, you need a venue and its infrastructure. You need actors, directors, sets, and all that paraphernalia. Above all, you need an audience willing to suspend disbelief and conspire with you to make those magic moments happen. At its core, theatre is collaboration. To succeed, playwrights need the right partners and co-creators, advocates and supporters who get what they're saying and will make it happen for them in the right way, the right producers. I was an outsider when Jitendra Verma of Tara Arts commissioned me the first time, and I discovered the immediacy of the art form, the excitement at the coalface. When Monstrous Regiment commissioned Song for a Sanctuary, the company was folding, but their investment of faith in me mattered hugely to me. Their decision not to produce the play was heartbreaking. But I think, in a way, Samira Ahmed has set the scene for the 80s. It was very interesting to be reminded of all the works that mattered to us at that time. If Rita Wolf had not come looking for me, if she'd not waded up to the empowerment of a production company, I might never have written another play. And sure, the world might not have noticed the absence of a Desi Miss Shakespeare, but also Kali might not have existed or evolved the way it did. Their rejection of the play and its slow development process with Rita and their team of actors was a huge learning curve. New writing needs time, resources, and effort, and to stage Asian women's plays, someone had to invest in them. This grew into something of a mission after the genesis of Kali. We met supportive men along the way, Tony Craze significantly, and Jatinder Verma, but mostly it was women. First of all, Helena Bell, who was a significant force in my life, Joe Hemmond, Isabel Hawson, Naseem Khan, Debbie Bestwick at Oval House, Sue Parish of Swings, and a wonderful dramaturg, Penny Gold, who have supported Kali over the years. While I'm aware that funding drove us all along a minority ethnic route, it has sustained Kali as a company. Judging by the number of productions and writers listed here in this wonderful book, that was Helena's idea. Thank you, Helena. It's great to have it. Judging by the number of works, the number of writers, it's obvious that there is a huge potential for Kali, and there was a huge need for the company, and it has continued to thrive because of that huge societal need. The question is, does the packaging marginalize and label the work? With a thriving second generation of artists around, we need to counter negative perceptions and find ways to articulate our concerns and obsessions without reference to reductive frames and barriers that keep us segregated from the mainstream. Everyone needs the arts. I think Samira's absolutely right. I think Josette underlines it beautifully. Everyone needs the arts, and our artists need and deserve to be recognized. We need to raise their profile. I wonder foolishly whether a prestigious, dedicated venue would be a step in the right direction. Maybe Helena shudders to hear this, but I wonder. We in the arts, both young and old, need a campaign as powerful and unbeatable as that which has protected our NHS. After all, what use is a body without a soul? And with this, I'll hand over to Patricia Kampa, who will probably help to answer the question, and hope that you'll find the answers in the breakout rooms. Thank you.
Do I begin? I can see myself in a blue frame, so I presume I can begin. Thank you, Rukhsana. I'm going to start this slightly anecdotally because I am an insider and an outsider. I came to England from the Caribbean, where I was already an established playwright and a writer of radio drama. My work had been done down the Caribbean in Canada and New York. And I came here into a system that I thought was absolutely wonderful because it was publicly funded. And for the first time, you weren't scrabbling for money and scrabbling for audiences. And the kind of commercial considerations I had in Jamaica, I could begin to lay down. But then you begin to realize when you're in the system that there are other challenges that you're going to face. Again, I was quite lucky coming from the Caribbean. I had a letter to Yvonne Brewster, who was the head of Taloa, and that began my relationship with that company. Not that she liked my work. I didn't get commissioned until she was ill, and then Christopher Rodriguez said, "Oh, I like your work," and then I got through. But I love Taloa and everything that Yvonne has done. And the other thing that, of course, helped me to survive was that I had a letter of introduction to Radio 4 drama, and I began to work in radio drama. And those two things have been able to creatively satisfy me in such a way that I can move between two worlds. But I worked in all sorts of odd jobs at Taloa before I became the artistic director. And I became the artistic director because I became extremely angry because they were trying to close down the company. They had said it had been around long enough. We didn't need a theatre for Black people. It was time for us to move on. There had been a movement to have a theatre of our own. The funding had been taken away. The theatre had been given to somebody else. It was a mess. And I felt very, very strongly about the necessity of theatre telling the stories of the communities that they represent. I mean, there's always this argument that's put forward, and I'm sure Kamika will recognize this, that minorities of various kinds make up 40% of London's population. At that point, we were getting less than 4% of the funding. So we didn't have a voice. Another frustration I found when I got there was that Black work essentially was seen as loss leaders. There was something that venues did and other companies partnered with you to do, but essentially that was their good work, that was their charity work, and that was not the main work of the company or the venue. To this day, the only venue I managed in London to have a full production in is the Victoria and Albert Museum, because I bullied my way in. But there was a real ring fence around who could be produced in London, and we were pushed more than anything else to become a touring company, because there was a sense that there wasn't enough BAME work that was touring around the place. My goodness, I think I've already come to the end of my 3 minutes, but basically I would like to say that we need to work together. We need, yes, we need venues, and yes, we also need to understand the absolute power of storytelling. Yes? And now I hand over to Kamiko, who also has been deep in the battle with us.
Thanks, Pat. Thank you, everyone. I'm just really honoured to be here today, to be celebrating 30 years of Carly Theatre. Carly has been like a sister company to us at New Earth Theatre, and we've been sharing an office, I think, for nearly 20 years, so we know each other well. And I just have to say, I'm not a writer, so I don't think I'm going to be as eloquent as some of the speakers we've had so far, but I'm going to do my very best and try and keep to my strict minute allocation, 3-minute allocation. So here goes. So yeah, what was I doing 30 years ago? I was an actor at that point. I'd been acting for about 6 years, and I just finished training at the Jacques Lecoq Theatre School. And as Samira said, in those days, there was support. If you were an actor, you could actually survive. You could live in London. If you weren't working, you could claim unemployment benefit as an actor. I could train at the City Lit, which was an extraordinary institution. I could do £1 for a whole course, up to 7 courses in a term. It was incredible. So I was really fortunate. And I think it's helped. You know, I mean, that's the reason why I'm still here, in a sense that I don't think I would have been able to continue otherwise. Not having gone to drama school meant my route into acting was not so straightforward, but the skills I learnt at the Lecoq School set me in good stead for making theatre. And 5 of us came together to form Yellow Earth Theatre, as it was known then, in 1995, partly out of frustration for the kinds of roles we were being offered as actors of East and Southeast Asian heritage. Also because we were interested in exploring our own stories and seeing if we could create a hybrid form of theatre using Eastern and Western storytelling forms. And it was partway through David Say's tenure as artistic director of the company. I remember he wrote an article, and he said that his long-term goal for the company would be that Yellow Earth would not need to exist, that there'd be no need for a company because every British East and Southeast Asian artist or East and Southeast Asian story would become part of the mainstream. Everyone would take it up and present it. And looking back at this, I think that comment was probably born out of a sense of frustration and exhaustion, as well as, yeah, a sense that that was what the sort of golden, that's what we want, that's what we were aiming for. But we had spent so many years being on the periphery and made to feel we were creating minority work for minority audiences. I know, and companies like ourselves, like Kali Tamasha, Tara, Theatre Fahotsi, and Tulawa, as Pat said, we were, we've been forced into sort of becoming touring companies, if we wanted that or not, and there's good and bad things about that, and there's challenges and opportunities with that. But we all have impressive bodies of work, excellent long-standing track records, and we've survived for decades. But yet we're still relatively small companies on working on modest means, and our work is often still confined to smaller studio spaces. And the fact we weren't allowed in, I think, made it our goal to get in. And it has been exhausting and dispiriting at times, and chasing and making the work often on other people's terms. And in some ways you could say it's a similar argument around colourblind casting, because I think colourblind casting was an interesting phenomenon that really sort of came about in the 80s and 90s. And yes, it got people jobs, and it was, and they were often interesting jobs, but it also served to give an appearance of integration. It was like the diversity cake with all the beautiful coloured sprinkles on the top, but if you cut into it, it was still white sponge underneath. There was no acknowledgement of our bodies on stage and our histories, and it sort of assumed that we were all the same. And in fact, it probably ended up suppressing, our own stories. So it's clear to me that New Earth and companies like Carly are so needed. And we will always have an essential role to play in our theatre ecology, and not least to ensure our stages and the stories we tell will represent and reflect contemporary British society. over the last few years, I've seen our East and Southeast Asian community swell in numbers. We're so much better connected through the use of social media. And this has also given rise to a newfound confidence, I feel. I see it no better reflected than in our annual summer schools, our New Earth academies, where young British East and Southeast Asians meet in a safe space, no need to explain themselves. They're not the only person who looks like them in the room. They feel free to create and express themselves, and it's incredibly empowering. I meet so many extraordinary young articulate women and non-binary, trans, LGBTQ, disabled, working class, British East and Southeast Asian artists, and they all still face enormous barriers, but they are organising, they're creating, and they're insisting on recognition and change. And the centre of gravity feels like it has shifted. Whether it's temporary, time will tell. But for now, I'm enjoying the fact that people are coming to our doors and knocking. After all, we are no longer the minority, but we are the global majority. Now, I'm going to hand over to Sudha Butcher.
Hello, I'm Sudha Butcher, and I'm really delighted to wish Kali a very happy 30th birthday. I'm so sorry I can't be there with you virtually in person, so my poor husband has been dragged in to do this. At least I'm not asking him to channel his Tom Hanks like I've had to do recently on a self-tape. I think, the main part of this symposium was about setting the scene, what the landscape may have been like for people like me 30 years ago. Well, for me as a second generation Asian coming here, having spent my childhood in Africa and India, theatre was about navigating your life here. So we met Jatinder Verma at Tara Arts, and we went on a scenic route where I was supposed to be studying maths and sociology, which I did do. I got my degree, but I got into theatre partly to find out who I was. I met Christine London Smith there. We set up Tamasha, and one thing led to another, but it really emerged from our friendship. And at the same time, we wanted to make work that was about our communities, but also not wanting them to be let off the hook. So challenging work, but work like Philip Headley would, say there are all these communities at Theatre Royal Stratford East, write something that they can see themselves reflected. So we were audience developers at the same time. So projects like House of the Sun about the Hindu Sindhi communities, we researched among them, went to Bombay, and then they saw themselves. Balti Kings, about the workers in a kitchen of a Balti restaurant. We went to Birmingham. We made so much work at the Rep, which was very much, again, stories about a Hindu-Muslim mixed marriage in India, which reflected with young people here. So all that intergenerational dialogue that we were having. The main challenge, I would say, is sort of how to be uniquely, subjectively your own voice, which for me was a sort of cultural hybrid, multilingual, having spent time in different countries, and yet look after your audiences. We knew that our people would get it, but the universal audience was white audiences. And if you used Punjabi or used Hindi, and you'll get reviews that say, we couldn't understand it. So also kind of inviting dialogue, about the disparity of discourse. You'd have full houses of Gujarati people coming to see a show about them, and yet the review would not reflect that at all. And some of those conversations are still being had today. I think the main point for me is that as an artist, I've had to take charge of curating my own voice. And that is something that young people are having to do, even today. So that's where the agency comes from. I'm so glad to see all this, the breakout rooms and the dialogue you're going to be having today, and the fact that you've got this book published, 30 years of plays, because, invisibility, and if a work isn't published, did it happen? So it is all so fantastic. Happy birthday.
So now for the surprise of the afternoon, my co-creator, my partner in crime, Rita Wolf, is here from New York. It's a huge pleasure to welcome you here. This is one of the bonuses of Zoom. Thank you so much, Rita. Rita Wolf was born in Kolkata, India, and grew up in North London. She has worked extensively in theatre, TV, and film in the UK as an actress. She co-founded Kali Theatre Company with me, of course, in 1991. She's currently working off-Broadway on a 2-play cycle, The Michaels, with writer-director Richard Nelson in New York City, where she has lived since 1993. And over to you now, Rita.
Thank you, Rukhsana. Oh gosh, I'm so enjoying listening to everyone. It's so inspiring. It's incredible. I really feel as though I'd rather listen than say anything, because I just, you know, I'm really, really enjoying it, and it's taking me back, but it's also filling in so many interesting blanks in my, you know, since I haven't lived in the UK for so long, but I know time is short. So, okay, Kali, the name, as all on this Zoom know, Kali is the name for the Hindu goddess of destruction. It's also the Bengali word for ink. And so Rukhsana and I chose this name for those reasons. I'm going to go back to 1989 or 90, which was when I met Rukhsana, after hearing first about the shocking murder of a Sikh woman in a London refuge at the hands of her husband. And then I was told by someone, oh, you know, this woman's written a play about this, don't you? And I didn't. And this seemed to me altogether too much like Providence, because I had been working in the theatre for probably about 10 years at that point. And in terms of subject matter, although there'd been a great many wonderful things I'd seen, such as Peter Brook's Mahabharat, for one thing, which was in terms of presentation and inspiration from a theatrical standpoint, had been extraordinary. There was a lot that was lacking in terms of subject matter. Things that actually spoke to me were few and far between. So I met Rukhsana, and we quickly realized that we had to do her play. And I hadn't realized that Monstrous Regiment had commissioned it, or I had forgotten, but we realized very quickly that we had to do it. We had to mount it. We had to do a production. We did a number of readings. Rukhsana's mentioned that we talked to a number of different theatres, and the genesis of the play, it was long. It took a long time for a venue to agree to do it. We realized that we had to do it ourselves. I had never directed anything before. To this day, I will tell you, Song for a Sanctuary is the only play that I've ever directed, which is really interesting. People have often asked me about it, and I feel it was just the importance of it for me. There are other plays that have interested me, but nothing that has had the immediacy or the date stamp on it. This was a play that needed to be done, and it needed to be done quickly. And so we produced it ourselves. We did it together. And we did it with little or no infrastructure, and originally no mentors. So as I'm listening to people talk, I realized what we were doing was not just producing a play, which in itself is a hard enough thing to do if you don't have experience, but also starting a company. We were doing those two things together, and each of them individually is hard enough. Now, as this segment is about Kali's 30th birthday celebration and the then and now part, I would like to say that Kali was not created to promote differences, and you know, differences can be many things, but well, it was, you know, apart from possibly creative differences, which are very healthy and good, but the only criteria to add your voice to their legacy is that you identify as a woman with South Asian heritage. I identify as a Bengali Brit. I think Rukhsana is a Pakistani Brit, and Balwant Kaur, who was the woman whose story inspired Song for a Sanctuary, was a Punjabi Brit. So we were all different, but our solidarity, Rukhsana's and mine, was really important in enabling us to form a working company to get things done. And personally, having lived in the US now for almost as long as I lived in the UK, I cannot overestimate the importance of grassroots movements like Black Lives Matter, movements like Me Too, and the impact that these organizations have had around the world. Focus has definitely been pulled to the underserved and underrepresented, and the existence of these organizations continues to inspire, as well as to combat the prevailing mood of divisiveness we've seen in both countries of late, as well, sadly, as my own country of origin, which is India. So for me, for all of us, I think it's clear, inclusivity and visibility in the performing arts world is these are more than just words. When we took Sanctuary out on the road in '91, I had personal visibility from having done television and film work to give us the leverage to book touring venues, as well as then with print media as it was then, to give us those very, very important first reviews of our work, which were essential to build up our portfolio and to give us credibility as a company, which, you know, those things normally take time. I think we were lucky, we got a little bit of a head start there. But 30 years, which is not an inconsiderable time, many, many, many plays later, staying visible remains a challenge. I think everybody's touched on that, and I would agree. How many people know about the pioneering women's writing workshops that Carly has promoted, and about their continued touring work over the 30-year period? Work has gone on for decades, often through parts of the country that don't see new work, let alone new work written by women. Carly's work, though still not in the mainstream of British culture, will, I hope, get a boost from the 30 Monologues anthology, which is a volume I could certainly have done with back in the day. And it's billed as, let me read the quote, a celebratory offering from one of the UK's most inspiring theatre companies. Well, couldn't agree more. And here's to the women that have kept it going: Janet Steele, Helena Bell, Rukhsana Ahmad, and many, many others. But, you know, I bow down to you. Your work is extraordinary. Your tenacity, your intelligence, and your desire to push things forward into the next decade and beyond. I wish you all my love and all the best for the next 30. And I guess back to Rukhsana. Yeah, back to Rukhsana to take it on.
Thank you, Rita. Thank you so much for that lovely message and for being here. I hope we can go into a discussion now. I was suggesting that we should keep ourselves on unmute so that you can all step in if you need to. I was going to just ask that question, which everybody's touched upon, but not really committed to an answer to, which is about ethnicity and work. How important is it? And perhaps each of you could answer it in the sequence in which you spoke, maybe. Is it a bit of an albatross to continue to define yourself as an ethnic company? Does it become an albatross around your neck as an artist? So first of all, Pat, if you could deal with this, and then maybe Kumiko, and then Rita. We don't have a lot of time left to discuss, but I think we may be able to talk a little bit about this. And the other thing is, what would be your message to the next generation? If you could each of you say a little bit about those two questions, it would be really nice.
Yes, it's sometimes a burden only to be seen as a Black writer, producer, whatever it is. But it is also where your creative strength comes from. So I would never, ever move away from it. I think a bit like disability sometimes, it's not for us to change, it's for other people to change their attitudes to us. And what I would also say to the younger ones that are coming up after me, and there's been such a flowering of such amazing talent over the last 10 years, is my inspiration has always been the blues parties. We have a good party, we enjoy ourselves, and other people come in to listen to the scam music. We must continue to have that sense of creating the work that we do as well as we possibly can. Build it and they will come.
Thank you. Kumiko?
Couldn't agree more, Pat. I hear you. Obviously, running a company like ourselves, where ethnicity is at the core, we see it as a strength. We draw on it. It's our heritage. It makes us who we are, and it's like a new earth for me. Is like rich, fertile ground, and all sorts of fascinating, interesting, powerful things can grow from it. And those people that come through, they're free to go elsewhere. They can go wherever they like. But I always feel that we're here. we're here if you need, if people need us, you know, if artists feel like this is where they want to be at this particular point in time, that's great. I don't want to restrict a writer of colour, of a particular ethnicity, to just write about their stories. That's not for me to do, but if they come and work with us, that's what we're interested in. Those are the stories we would like to share with people, because I think it's really important that those are shared. So yeah, and of course it's a double-edged sword in many ways, but I think it's like I said, we're always going to be needed, and we have a really crucial role to play. So what would I say to the next generation? I think it's, you know, what we've been through this last year and a half, it has been unprecedented. That's a horrible, you know, everyone's saying that, but it really has been. And we don't know yet what the future is going to look like. But I want people to feel that there is hope. I think there's hope. You know, we always have hope in the next generation, and that young people are just incredible. As I mentioned, so articulate, so thoughtful. And I think, you know, draw on your passions, your energy. There are many of us, and we can find each other and we can work together. And I think, you know, continue the work, have faith. Yeah, keep the flag flying.
Thank you. Thank you. Rita, did you want to add to this?
Yeah, no, just to make a little comment. I enjoyed very much listening both to Kumiko and to Pat. I actually think there has never in my professional life been a better time to be a woman of colour in the creative fields. I absolutely know that it's a very, very fertile time. There are many reasons for that. Certainly in the US, there's a bit, you know, there's political change, and in the UK too, political change. We can't underestimate how important that is. I think people, and to use Kumiko's word, confidence, there's a confidence that I think wasn't there in one's own abilities, and power in the power structures. Clearly, once you feel as though someone will listen, you feel more confident in what you have to say. I would also add, regarding the next generation, younger people coming up who want to work in the creative fields, we don't need to tell them anything. They honestly, I think they know. They've all we have had to do is to do what we've been doing. We've set the groundwork. Unsurprisingly, I was speaking to Rukhsana the other day. Both her daughter and my daughter are on the way to becoming established writers, and that's extraordinary to me. And we remarked on how extraordinary it is, but then again, maybe not. It may just have been, you know, an obvious thing that happened. But I will say, no, they've got it. They know what they want to say. They know how they want to say it. They feel completely empowered to write, to perform, to get behind a camera, to do all of those things that were so much harder to do when I was starting out as a creative. So I just wish them well. Looking forward to collaborating more with people of all different generations. So interested in what everybody has to say, and I'm really looking forward to the breakout rooms. Thanks, Rukhsana.
Thank you very much, panel, for those interesting comments. Well, from the days of Gurdeep Chaggar and Blair Peach to the murder of Joe Swinson, things feel like they've changed, but not changed that much. So I think people will find their answers in the breakout rooms. I do believe that age and experience are overrated, because every context changes and people have to find their own solutions in their own times. And I'm sure you will all find them, audience members. Amongst them are many students, I believe, of Central School of Speech and Drama, and with leaders like Josette and Helena Bell, who's always inspiring. We hope we'll go forward, you know, further and onwards. So good luck to everyone in Cali and everyone outside Cali as well. And with that, I'll hand you back to Helena's good hands. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Rukhsana, Rita, Pat, Kumiko and Sudha. Completely fascinating discussion of the wider landscape, I think. Absolutely gripping, and I think it will feed really well into our breakout rooms. So now for the second extract from 30, This is Nazma by Nasa Muti, performed by Arman Azir. Please be aware it contains strong language.
Welcome to the mailbox. The person you have called cannot accept your call. Please leave your message after the beep.
Mama?
Welcome to the...
Mama? Yeah.
Welcome to the mailbox. The person you're calling is unable to take your call. Please leave your message after the beep. To re-record your message, key hash at any time.
Mama? Mama? Mama, are you okay? Mama, where have you gone? Mama? My hair is knotty, it's so knotty I cannot get the knots out, and the ladies cannot get the knots out either. Mama, I don't want to get into trouble for having knotty hair. Bilal got some of the knots out, but that was ages ago, and new knots have grown. So many knots. I don't think he liked to get the knots. He did it. He did it quite, even though I showed him. I showed him the right way, but he's still, retard. Retard's not my name, silly. Retard. There are lots of ladies here that cry. They just cry, Mama. Some of them have babies and they cry. And I cannot really sleep because of all the cries. I don't like my bed. My bed is small, my bed is smelly, my bed is farty like bad Papa farts. Where is Papa? I love Papa. I like the bed at home with you. I do also like the bed with Bilal too. The bed was big with Bilal. He holds me and sometimes rubs me. I like the rubbing. I like the nice rubbing, not the rough rubbing. I tried to tell him, I try. The poopy comes out of there and he chases me. Chase, chase. He's got a long poo-poo, Mama. A poo-poo stuck to him where a front bottom should be. Bilal is, I think, a bad boy. He's a naughty boy, a wicked boy. Bilal is very punished. Bilal is very tricked. He likes to fuck boys. Fuck boys. I think I love Bilal. I think I do. Bilal is a soldier. Bilal is a sailor. Bilal is a prince. He's a prince, Mama. I like to kiss Bilal. I don't like his Rolex. His Rolex is naughty. If I be naughty, his Rolex is very naughty. Sometimes I don't mean to be naughty. There was blood, Mama. Blood all in the toilet and the Rolex got me on the chin. Very bad Rolex. Mama. Mama, I love you. I tried to tell Bilal on Tuesdays, Wednesdays and Fridays I'll go to the centre and that Mina will be so cross. But Bilal said no more centre. I still wear the shiny ring. It's so shiny. But Bilal doesn't always wear his shiny ring. He's got a friend from Tesco's. His name is Will. They shut the bedroom door and say, fuck off. That's not very nice. Fuck off, fatty retard, or I'll stab you in the heart. I hope the Rolex will get them. I'll just rub myself and eat the twiglets because there isn't any dinner. Who is that? I heard Will say. Bilal says that is my sister, but I'm not the sister though, am I, Mama?
I'm the bride, I'm the princess, aren't I, Mama? On the phone, I said the prayer, and I wore the lipstick and the jewels and the silks and the happiness and the smiles and smiley on your face and smiley on Papa's face. I'm not allowed to answer the door, I'm not allowed to answer the phone, that's just the rules. But then one day the door is bang, bang, bang. Bang, bang, bang. I peep through the curtain and it is Mina and another lady and they wave. She's got minstrels. I have to open the door. I have to get those minstrels. She and the lady say they are happy to have found me. She says they don't have much time and they ask me all these questions, Mama. The lady has a pen. Scribble, 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 and a recorder. I really want to touch the buttons on the recorder. I'm not allowed to touch the buttons. Some are easy peasy questions, so easy. What is your name? Nazma Mahmood. How old are you, Nazma Mahmood? 33. And the next questions are strange, Mama. I don't know these questions. What is a husband? I don't know. I like to watch the lines go up on the recorder, so I speak loud and I speak slow. Is Bilal a husband? What is marriage? And then she asked a Rudy question, a really, really Rudy question. The poopy bottom is for the poopy and the front bottom is for the pee-pee. The lady turns the recorder off and I cannot see the lines anymore. Mina gets a bag and I say that is Bilal's bag and she says it doesn't matter. Quick, quick, and she puts my knickers and my vest and my asthma pump in just for a little while, just a little trip. And now I'm here with the babies and the ladies and the crying.
The mailbox is now full and cannot accept any more messages at this time. Goodbye.
Mama? Mama? My hair is very knotty, Mama. Mama.
So now it's time to move to our second panel to hear from Carly writers now and how they are sustaining their careers. This panel is chaired by Janet Steele, who is currently Programme Manager for Commonwealth Writers and Creative Commonwealth at the Commonwealth Foundation. Janet was Carly's Artistic Director from 2002 until 2016. During that period, Janet directed many of the company's groundbreaking productions and initiated the first of Carly's writer development programmes. Thanks, Janet. Over to you.
Thanks, Helena. Well, it's hard to know where to start after watching that piece. It brought back so many memories and heartache. But I am pleased to be here, and I'm joined on this panel by three incredible writers. The first is Samira Ahmed, who writes for theatre, radio and TV. Her play Butcher Boys was joint winner of the 2008 Bruntwood Prize. Between 2000 and 2012, she was a radio drama producer at the BBC, and she's currently a core writer for The Archers. Carly has presented her plays Mustafa in collaboration with the Birmingham Rep and Ready or Not. She is currently writing When the Fire's Gone Out for Carly's Home Festival in October. I'm also joined by Satinder Chauhan, a journalist and documentary researcher turned playwright. Satinder is currently writing Lotus Beauty for Hampstead Theatre. Carly has presented her plays Zameen and, in collaboration with Pursued by a Bear, Kabaddi Kabaddi Kabaddi. She is currently developing Empire of the Mind for the Sphinx 30 initiative and Carly's Home Festival in October. Our third writer is Nesa Murti. Nesa is a 2 times Writers Guild nominated writer who is currently under commission to the Actors Touring Company, the National Youth Theatre, Fuel, Kiln Theatre, Almeida Theatre, and the English Touring Theatre. She's a member of the Coronation Street writing team and currently has 3 TV series ideas in development. Carly presented her play Sundowning in 2018. Well, it feels really, really special to be a part of this conversation and to be in such wonderful company. Reflecting on my almost 15 years at Carly, it was filled with the most amazing memories made up of highs, a lot of highs, amongst the struggles previously mentioned by my friends. We're all here to celebrate Carly at 30 and the achievements of all of those who made every workshop, reading, and production possible. Collectively, hundreds of actors, creatives, administrators were all there to bring to life characters and stories written by writers who were mostly at the start of their journey as playwrights. My journey in theatre started at the age of 18 when I got my first acting role at the Royal Court, playing Cinders in a Polish play called Cinders. I spent several years on and off at the court, and that's where my understanding of the need for script development started. I worked with lots of new writers in workshops and readings. Very few were Black or Asian, and none of them were women. When I joined Carly as artistic director, I wanted to shift that paradigm. Carly's shorts were already in place. These were a series of short plays or scratch performances that were staged at the Oval House. These performances were incredibly important as they were introducing new writers and narratives to audiences. But we really didn't have anything structured in place to continue supporting these writers as our budgets were limited. With the new core funding from the Arts Council came security, and I was able to design the Writers' Development Programme, which started with our annual open call. It was so important to have an open door policy to encourage writers to submit their work, even if it was a scene or 2. Around 10 to 12 were selected to attend regular writing workshops, usually held at the weekend or in the evening at the Carly offices, and the writers would travel from across the country. From these workshops, the scripts or scenes that were ready to go in front of an audience were selected to be a part of the Carly Shorts readings. From the readings, scripts were selected to be developed further and writers received one-to-one dramaturgy to complete their scripts. These were then workshopped and received a full public reading. From these writers, scripts were selected to be developed for full production. On average, it would take 5 years to fully develop a play, and the majority of Carly tours were by writers who had never had a work professionally produced before. Each play was different in style and content, but what made them a Carly play was the fact that they were by writers who had something to say, courageous writers who didn't self-censor, who received praise, but also criticism from those who would rather those stories remained unheard. I'm really proud to have played a part in sharing those stories, and I thank each writer for their bravery and for forcing me to be brave too. Almost all of the Carly writers had to squeeze their writing in around the demands of having a young family or having a profession or being a mum and having a profession. Most wanted to be full-time writers, as Naila, Satinder and Nesa are now. I have total admiration and I'm a huge fan of all 3 of these talented writers. It gives me great pleasure to be here with you today, and we'll start now by handing over to Naila Ahmed.
Thank you very much, Janet. It is so lovely to be here, so lovely to be in this company. And I'm happy to say that I have 3 plays, including the one that's been written for the Home Festival with Carly. That's my experience with Carly so far. The first with Janet, the second started with Janet and was handed over to Helena, and the third is with Helena. And they've been really satisfying creative experiences. And I suppose writing in different forms, etc. The one thing I truly cannot, this isn't just happy birthday, let's all be nice. I truly can't thank Carly enough for the experience of, is exactly that, a satisfying creative experience where you feel that what it is that you want to write isn't being channeled into something that it's not. It's more that somebody who has experience of making theatre is doing their best to help you tell that story. And I've had it the way that it hasn't worked. And with Carly, I think it's a real huge big neon tick to say that I've had 3 experiences, and in all of them I don't feel that that's wavered. So it's just been wonderful. In my work, as far as theatre goes, really I don't think I would have much of a journey if it wasn't for having those experiences with Carly, because I think most importantly it gave me the confidence to know what I wanted to say could be said, and I just didn't need to adjust it for anyone. I did need to learn things a lot. I did need to adjust how these stories might be told and what's possible with a modest budget, you know, as all theatre makers are always trying to make everything happen for you. All of those things I had to learn, but never really at the cost of it'll only go on, which I felt in other areas of writing, if you're slightly, you know, able to, if what you want to say is slightly malleable for the wrong reasons. And so that's been a wonderful experience. It's been wonderful to work with Janet and Helena. I don't actually know the world of theatre really well. I'm always embarrassed of myself in the corner when I speak to people who work in theatre a lot, because they know the London circuit, they can describe what kind of theatre different theatres are, and I kind of have no idea. If I went one day and I watched something, I'll remember if I enjoyed it or not, but I don't really engage much with the, you know, I suppose because I don't have much of an academic theatre background where I've kind of studied all of the acting forms and the people that inform them, and I haven't done the whole 10 years on Shakespeare alone. I just really love any space that becomes a theatre space and what that does to that space, and there being an audience with something going on a stage. And the most exciting bit for me is what's going on behind stage that we never see, and that as a writer you get to look in on. So for those reasons, I suppose, again, it's been really nice being able to tell 3 stories that I feel in other places I might not have been able to tell. Post 9/11, Janet and Helena know this more than anybody, just any corner of the British Muslim experience, and every corner of the British Muslim experience has been of interest to me, but it was not surprising, but still a bit surprising, how often the lack of braveness, I suppose, of commissioning bodies wouldn't let a Muslim woman, possibly because she's a bit round, possibly because she's a Brummie and not London centric, they just wouldn't trust you. I felt it was a trust issue. They wouldn't trust me to write that story. So my love affair with Carly is because I can do that, and I have intelligent people around me who know more about theatre than I do to say, yeah, Nyla, that's not going to work. So, you know, can we talk about this? And then we address it and we give it a shot. And that is the kind of learning process, a creatively satisfying learning process that I think I think gives writers the skills to be full-time writers. I couldn't be more proud of the fact that this is the 11th year that I'm sustaining myself, and along with my husband, my family, just from writing. I didn't ever dream that would even be possible, and I've been doing it now without thinking about it. And as everybody's been talking, I suddenly feel like, hey, that's really good. I should congratulate myself. But it doesn't come without its challenges, but it is such a blessing that that's a possibility. And because I fear, and everybody who knows me knows I ramble, I'm going to now pass you on to the wonderful Satinder Chauhan, so that she can speak more eloquently, but she's brilliant. So there you go.
Rookie mistake. Thank you to the wonderful Nyla as well. That was beautifully eloquent, and I concur with everything you say. So I just want to begin by saying hello, everyone, and I feel so honored to be a part of today, celebrating Kali. I've been privileged enough to have a long-standing relationship with the company, which began many, many moons ago, when I was far too old already and still dreaming of being a writer. I just never had the courage, the confidence, or the know-how to write till I met Kali. And I was in my early 30s working as a BBC researcher for a month in my ancestral homeland of Punjab, India, after a decade or so away from there. And I'd grown up with these romantic images of the lush kind of golden green fields of Punjab. But while I was there for the other project, I learned about thousands of farmer suicides that were happening in the killing fields of Punjab and across India. Increased chemical and corporate farming, land grabbing, and climate change were causing like vast economic and ecological devastation. So when I was back in the UK, I felt compelled to write a story about a struggling GM cotton farmer and his family, but I didn't know how or where to begin. But by some serendipitous turn, I saw that open call out that Janet was talking about, requesting short plays by Asian women writers for Kali Theatre. And with no theatre background or interest in theatre at all, I looked Kali up and I decided to submit. And I just began writing Zameen. And I remember finishing that short play and dropping off my printed script at the Kali office, which was just 5 minutes round the corner from where I was still working as a researcher. My hands were trembling, and I still remember the day Kali sent me a letter to tell me my short play had been accepted, and my hands were trembling again. The play went through exciting stages, from a Kali writing course, workshops, rehearsed readings, to the most inspiring Arts Council funded research trip, which Chris helped me put together. And it was to the cotton fields of Punjab, to the villages where I lived with the farmers and their families for a couple of months. And eventually there was a national tour. And I felt so proud to tell the story of these struggling yet brave, dignified farmers. And that was all because of Kali. And we got great support from, diverse audiences, from Asian communities and the Asian press, but interest from a mainstream theatre establishment, media, mainstream media and publishers was significantly lacking. So when Zameen first toured, we couldn't get the play published. And in light of the mass farmer protests in India this past year, which have erupted from that initial agrarian crisis, Zameen is now finally being published almost 15 years later. And as writers and artists of colour, I think we live and work on these creative fault lines, seeing tomorrow's seismic changes rumbling today. And with Zameen, Kali had the foresight to see this was a vital story of global relevance that needed to be told, even if a wider world only caught up because of Indian farmer protests over a decade later. So I'm just eternally grateful to Kali for supporting writers like me who desperately need the experience of our work being staged so that we can preserve our stories, that we can reach out to new audiences and so we can grow as writers. Kali is a home, it's a family, it's a safe, supportive space, a company that gives its artists that courage and confidence, understands our storytelling, our creative struggles, and makes us feel like we belong to a theatre community, especially when too often a myopic British theatre establishment has repeatedly closed doors on us. Our diverse stories are the lifeblood of our communities. So for underrepresented ones like ours, we must keep them flowing in the world outside. And it's time for a wider industry to step up, because for 30 outstanding years, Kali has more than paved the way. So thank you, Kali, and here's to many more decades. I now hand over to Nesa, the wonderfully talented Nesa.
Well, that was absolutely, I don't know how to follow either of you, so I'm very, very nervous. I absolutely echo everything that you both have said in very, very eloquent ways. I'm just going to keep this short, really, mainly because this is making me extremely emotional. And I'm an emotional wreck anyway, as most people will testify here too, probably why I'm a writer. But I guess what I want to say really is that for many reasons, I shouldn't be here today. Statistically, I really shouldn't, because I'm a mixed race, working class. Now, I wasn't when I first started with Kali, but now I'm a mother to 2 children, and I'm a woman. And theatre was not on my agenda at all whatsoever as a young person growing up. I grew up in Surrey, which sounds completely incongruous, not the posh part, I always have to emphasize. And I'm mixed race, and I didn't have any kind of cultural connection to the South Asian side of me whatsoever. So Kali really changed my life in more ways than one, not just on a kind of career trajectory way, but it interconnected me with other women of colour that I had shut out of my existence as a despite being a young person of colour, which sounds very strange, but if you look at my back catalogue of work, I'm sure you'll come to some conclusions of your own. So much similar to the other women that have spoken so brilliantly today. Kali kick-started my career really in the arts, in theatre. Sadly, it has been an absolute fight of a career. I know that they are better. I feel like things get better every day. I get worried that they're maybe just getting slightly better for me, but I hope and live in hope that they aren't. But I've been working professionally for this is my 10th year, and it has been, there's no 2 ways about it. It's been a fight from start to finish. Many of the barriers that you've heard about, many of the invisible barriers, many people that just won't believe in you or are scared. It's what Nyla was saying about fear and risk and being risk averse, institutional racism, systemic, all of that, as well as classism, which I've, the stories that I want to tell are about working class women of colour, essentially, and putting them at the centre of the narrative, where traditionally, my friend, a very good friend of mine who's an actor herself, says she's so sick of being the 3rd non-white police woman who only says, here's the doc sarge. So, I was going to swear then, but I won't, but I'm sure you know what I'm going to say. And I feel like my mission as an artist, and what Kali allowed me to do and gave me a platform was to tell the stories, as exactly as Janet says, that I wanted to tell the stories that only I could tell, and put women, working class women of colour at the centre, to interrogate my mixed race identity. And as strange as it sounds, but to understand that I am a woman of colour, because that wasn't how I was brought up. And I know that sounds extremely odd. The only way you learn as a writer is by doing. I'm sure you all know that, but plays are not literary documents, they are to be performed, and that's what Carly does best. It gets your work read, it gets professional actors in, you see it, you see what's working, you cry into the abyss because it's not working, but then they pick you up again off the floor and they help you to make it work. And they change the world a little bit with you, and that's what I strongly believe. And I hold my don't know what's the right metaphor. Take my hat off to the extraordinary women that have come before me, that have made the industry what it is now, so that I can work even through the fight. It's easier than it was for them. I have under no illusion, but I feel that my duty is not just as an artist in going forward, but is as an activist as well, and to lay the breadcrumbs of the generations that are coming after me. And I guess I've sort of come to the conclusion that I might not see that change, you know, and that's fine. But in my heart, and what Carly so brilliantly offered in collaboration with me, was that we were going to change the world a little bit. And I hope that's what we did. Oh no, I've gone. Sorry, dodgy internet. I'm going to pass you back to Janet. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, all three of you. It was just so lovely hearing you all talk and hearing your memories, and obviously sharing those memories with you. They're very special. There are real words that ping out of all of everything that you were saying. You know, words like confidence, trust, courage was said several times. I loved Satinder's description of creative fault lines, seeing problems of the future now, you know, having that foresight. I just thought that was absolutely brilliant. And Nesa, you know, you said that you don't know if you'll be around to see the change. Well, you are making the change. You are the change. So you will, because it's happening now, you know, and you have made things change. So it was really brilliant. So I just want to bring you all in now into this conversation. You know, in terms of courage, you writers, you know, generally sit alone in their room writing, spend hours and hours and hours on their own, and then you know, as a couple of you have said, you give this precious document over to somebody, and then it comes out of the mouths of actors, and how that feels, you know. You've all said it in different ways, but if I could just ask you if you've got any recollections of that moment when you hear things and you think, wow, did I really write that? Or you hear things and you think, oh God, did I really write that? You know. So who would like to go first to discuss this? What about you, Nyla?
Yeah, I've had both those moments. I'm not going to admit to the latter. Everything I write is a piece of genius. But yes, I've had both those moments. But there's also those lovely moments, and it's in what you said, Janet, where without you having even had a moment by the coffee with the actor, they sit around and they really inhabit that character, and you know, it's such a gift. It's hard to put into words for someone like me, because it is just that. It's a gift that you try your best to shape and to paint this character in words, and then somebody comes along and gets it, and it's sort of as simple as that, really, getting it and not getting it. And the not getting it is when you think, okay, there's something that I'm thinking in here that I haven't yet got on the page in the way that will communicate it that way. But to be honest, I think all of the times, every play because you're not writing the same thing again, it's an entirely new experience, and every character, unless please somebody tell me now if I'm writing the same person again and again, because I hope I'm not, but every character is a new iteration of something that you've been thinking, that you've been mulling on. So it feels new every time, and every time that they sit around. I mean, the last experience for me was Ready or Not with Helena, and I remember, which is a lovely part in theatre, being in the casting sessions with Helena, and just, it's so interesting that poor actors, I don't know it from that point of view because I don't act and never have, but they will walk in and me and Helena are just kind of leaning in going, oh yeah, they look the part, she could be a good so-and-so character. And there's a wonderful character I fell in love with when I wrote her called Pat, and when sadly, who's no longer with us, but Joan came in, both Hella and I just looked at each other, and our shorthand was, she totally looks the part. And then she started speaking and she totally was Pat. And Joan sort of had Pat was a former teacher, and she kind of had a teacherly attitude anyway. So it's just magic. When that happens, it's magic.
And how about you, Satinder?
So yeah, likewise, it's terrifying and just so like reaffirming to hear your words sometimes, but then, you know, you're sort of heavily critical and you think that things can be better all the time. And just working with actors, working with directors. I mean, I've been so lucky with Zameen. I've worked with you, Janet. I've worked with Helena. I've worked with Paulette Randall, Pooja Ghai, Poonam Bra, you know, and then just a host of like brilliant actors and actresses, and just learned so much. And I think for me, because I always had aspirations to be a novelist, and somehow I ended up in theatre because I saw that call out, and I went on this massive sort of diversion. And I think the most wonderful gift that Carly has given me, because I, you know, like Nyla and Nessa, I didn't have an interest in theatre. I didn't have a theatre background, but what I've learned by becoming a writer and growing as a playwright is that actually it's probably the creative medium that fits me best because of that sort of nature of community and collaboration. The fact that it's not just sitting in your room writing a novel, you know, in your sort of garret. You do come out, you do emerge, and the work continues to grow and come alive in different ways through your collaborations with different people, with this community of artists. And, you know, I'm from South or West London, so I've always had that sort of community spirit. And so for me, it feels like actually the creative form that fits me best in a way. And there are so many rewards and the joys of just working and collaborating in that way and learning just constantly all the time. So yeah, terrifying and reaffirming in equal measure. And then that community thing continues, doesn't it? When we stage a production, when it's actually in that communal space between an audience and artists, we're still creating the work. The work continues to grow and come alive. So it's that. And Carly, I think, gifted us that experience sort of as emerging writers as well. And yeah, I think that's the biggest thing that I would take from all of that.
Brilliant, thank you. And Nessa, I'd like to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything that's been said, really. And as I said before, it doesn't, nothing beats it when you hear your words heard out loud, and somebody is inhabiting that person, and you know, they either stand up, and I don't mean physically, but they stand up in terms of nuance and complexity, and you know, they're fleshed in some shape or form, or they don't, or they tell you something that's incredibly wrong, you know, that's missing in the heart of your story. And I think what's brilliant, and I guess actually we have talked about them a lot, and obviously there are actors among this cohort, but I think actors probably also are a massive unsung heroes of Carly, because they deserve a massive shout out in their own right, because not just Carly actors, but obviously like all actors, but particularly Carly actors, they take the time, as Nyla was saying, to they only look at their journey as well, which is super useful. Whereas when you're world building, and I know I sound like I want to be a god, but I don't mean it quite like that. You are building the entire world, so you don't necessarily at the start, at that early stage of writing, hopefully by the end you're not zoning in and making sure that somebody's journey is compelling and propulsive and driving your story forward. But what the actor does is ask you that and pulls you up when it isn't working. So it's terrifying, that moment, but it's the only way I think you'll ever know if it's, as I said, it's a live thing, it's a conversation with the audience. It's your litmus test moment.
No, absolutely. So again, you know, you kept using the word courage there, and it's really interesting to be brave to show your work and to have actors to say it. And as Satinder said, what happens when it goes in front of an audience? And then, of course, what happens when it goes in front of an audience? It's that, you know, is there going to be kickback? And I think, being a South Asian woman writer, there is courage you have to have, because there's the fear. You know, there is a fear for several reasons. And, you know, a couple of occasions, Carly writers have actually used pseudonyms because they didn't want to use their own names because of fear from the family or from the community. They were writing about things that they felt were sort of walking a line that some people might not like, which is really interesting. So you've got lots of things to contend with, which I know dearly, and I thank you for being so brave. And we're going to finish now, well, in the 2 minutes we've got, but just moving forward in terms of, if you could just keep it really short, but just say, you know, about being brave and about being courageous. If you were talking to yourself as you were 15 years ago, you know, what would you say to yourself about being a playwright? Would you say anything? Would you, you know, if you had to give yourself a little word in the ear, what might it be? What about you, Nyla?
Probably, I would just say that writers write. I think concentrating on your part of the equation is the best way for anybody from any background stopping and looking at your work and saying, oh, and then it possibly moving forward. So don't worry about that. Just write. That's the bit that you've got to do and keep doing.
Brilliant. And Satinder?
I think it's just about trusting your voice and trusting your instinct, you know, your developing voice. And yes, it's good to listen to the world outside and to listen to what a plethora of voices might be telling you to do and how to shape things. But I think ultimately that's also about you trusting your gut instinct about what is right for your voice and what is right for your work. And I think that's something that I've only learnt through experience. So if I could go back and tell myself that from all those years ago, I think that would be it, because I think, you know, there's an honesty to storytelling when it's, you know, absolutely a pure form of storytelling. And yeah, so it's just trusting yourself through that and your voice and writing.
Nice.
Yeah, very similar really. I think it would be to same word, but be brave, stand up for what you believe in, trust your gut, trust what you you know and feel, and where you come from, and not to be railroaded, I think, and to yeah, really stand up for yourself, and not let others grind you down, I suppose. I think that's a kind of a psychological obstacle as well as a physical one, and I think you just have to armor up, be ready for the fight, and keep going.
Brilliant. What a fantastic thing to end on. So Carly, armor up, and keep going, keep going, keep going. Back to you, Helena.
Thank you, Janet. Thank you, all you incredible writers too. What an amazing panel. It's so interesting to hear all of that. Naila, Satinder and Nasa. So now we're going to move to the breakout sessions where I'm sure we will hear so much more from all the provocations and inspirations that we've had so far. We've done our best to put you into your breakout room, but if you didn't choose one, then the Carly team have chosen one for you. So when you move into them, please can you switch your microphone on and select gallery view in Zoom so you can see everybody in the room. The facilitator, the room facilitator, will then introduce themselves. But first, we're going to take a 10-minute comfort break. Please, can you be back at your screens by 4 o'clock, please? And we will then automatically transfer you into the breakout rooms. Thank you. Hi, welcome back. Hope you've had some stimulating discussions. In a few minutes, we'll hear from each breakout room facilitator who will briefly share the outcomes from your rooms. But first, here's our final extract from 30. This piece was one of our Carly solos. During the last lockdown year, we commissioned 15 writers to create solos for 15 actors to self-record from their homes. All these brilliant pieces are on the website and prove fascinating insight into the preoccupations of our writers and the many world events of the last year. This next piece was inspired by the pulling down of the Edward Colston statue in Bristol. This is Me and Ed by Athir Sen-Gupta, performed by Kamal Armin.
We good to go? I was 5 when I first met Ed. My first day at school. My first memory. Hand in hand with Mum and Dad, insisting that they swing me for the umpteenth time and make the wee sound. The wee sound was obligatory. Mum saying good girls keep their feet on the ground and Dad disagreeing, slipping me a Werther's original to keep me sweet. And there he was, looking down on us. On me. Hair curling round his shoulders, a hand cupping a weary chin, the other holding a walking stick. And I look up at him, and I ask, who's he? Mum and Dad looked at each other. Who's going to tell her? School was interesting. After the initial, what's your name? How many sisters and brothers do you have? What's your favourite colour? The conversation always progressed to, so where are you from? Of course I wanted to say here, but even then I knew the real answer lay elsewhere. So I went home and asked Mum and Dad. Next day I stride in. The Caribbean? The kid's face fell. You can't be from the Caribbean, you're not black. I didn't know what to say to this, so off I trotted back to the rents. Mum said I was black, that we were black on account of us not being white. Black is a political colour. What's political? Dad looks at Mum, one thing at a time. Mum rolls her eyes. You know, it's not only black people who are from the Caribbean, but Indians, like us. But Pooja from Blue Class is Indian from India. How can Indians not be from India? Mum said, do you remember how we talked about slavery? Yeah, dinner times were fun at my house. Well, when slavery ended, they created a new system to replace it called indentured labour. Instead of Africans, they were Asians. Needless to say, when I reported my findings at school the next day, the kids were somewhat unimpressed. Next time I was asked where I was from, I said India, and that settled it. When I reached secondary school, the boys in my class, they would ask each other, do you prefer blondes or brunettes? And then they'd answer accordingly, and then they'd high-five each other on their preferences. I marvelled at their ability to exclude me without excluding me. Word got around that one of the girls in my class was selling dodgy contact lenses in the common room. Green, blue, hazel, all yours for a £5. I went hungry that lunchtime, abandoned my belly, and bought myself a new set of eyes. I opted for blue, believing I could buy myself out of my brownness. And even then, I didn't realise she didn't have a single white girl as a customer. Contacts in, school's done, homeward bound through my new blue-tinted glasses. And I spotted Ed. And I wonder what colour eyes he had. Surely blue. Green at a push. Normally, I would always remember to take my contacts out before getting home, but this one time, I forgot. And Mum was home early from work. She looks at me, and then she looks away, and then she looks at me again. What's that? She steps in. Closer. Nothing. Your eyes. Her eyes widen as she realizes what I've done. How I've erased her. How I've erased us. Her hand rises and makes its way across my cheek, crisp. The force of it actually knocks one of my contacts out. Mum immediately apologises. Dad didn't speak to her for a month. And I never wore those contacts again. I started reading. Online, offline, I talked to people. I asked questions, I listened, I argued. I listened again. I opted for History A-level, and all the usual cliches apply. If you don't know where you're coming from, you can't know where you're going. I learned about Ed. 100,000 wrenched from their homes. 100,000 branded with the initials RAC, hot metal on cold skin. I must have passed Ed thousands of times, twice a day for 13 years. 13 years. And he went from being a part of the furniture to being a splinter in my skin. And each time I passed him, there was something new. Pigeon poo, piss on the pedestal, chips and curry sauce. But you know what the thing with Ed was? Nothing stuck. All the poo, the piss, the chips would be washed away, and he'd be good as new. Fresh as a daisy, good as gold, bright as bronze. It's like a superpower, isn't it? Some people can do anything, like anything, and it slips right off them. Nothing sticks. But it's basic physics. You know this. What goes up must come down, like an apple falling from a tree or a coin you toss to make a life decision. Or him. It. Ed. No one or nothing is exempt from gravity. You know, people say we did what we did because we're brutes and we do not understand history, but it is the exact opposite. We know too much. We understand everything. Never underestimate the power of newly acquired knowledge, a face mask and rope. And you might say, oh, but he was a man of his time. But he is not a man of ours. I just didn't want to live under his shadow anymore. Does that answer your question?
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Welcome back, everybody. We're now going to hear from each breakout room facilitator who will report back on the discussions you've been having in your rooms and make 3 recommendations for change. So first off, can we hear back from Athea Sedgupta reporting from room 1 discussing political writing and artivism? Thanks, Athea.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Can I just see a few nods? Yep, brilliant. Thank you. Great. So our room was called Artivism, Challenging the Status Quo Through Political Writing. So I had 3 provocations that I put to the room, and I'll read them out to you now, and then I'll talk about what we talked about. So the first provocation was, is your work inherently political due to being female and of South Asian heritage? The second provocation was, what obstacles remain for female South Asian writers? And the third was, if you could action one thing today to help female South Asian writers in the theatre industry, what would it be? So we had a really lively discussion. It was really interesting. And some of the stuff we talked about was how, quite simply, our work doesn't get put on. We talked about how our existences are politicized. And one person mentioned they just might want to write about a Black couple in New York or a supernatural story, but somehow we're pigeonholed into writing a certain kind of story based on what we look like and who we are. If our work does go on, venues only, or they tend to only accept 1 Asian play per season, if we're lucky, or 1 per year. And there is also this hot new thing syndrome, whereby one person who may be female and South Asian is lifted out of the community and given all of the work. And there's a kind of fetishization of that one person rather than a democratic spreading out of the work. So we also talked about how venues don't do audience development. So when or if a play doesn't do well from one of our communities, the venue will say, I told you so, you know, it just doesn't work. Audiences don't like the stuff that you're producing, when in fact they actually need to put the work in and do those the audience development. We also talked about how if there's no network or support, if you're not from a traditional theatre family, it can be really, really isolating, and it kind of makes you feel like giving up, because you don't know if you get knocked back or have one rejection, you don't have that support to kind of buoy you up again. And in terms of making things better, we had more than 3 recommendations. I apologise, Helena. But the first thing someone said was submit your play to Carly, which I fully agree with. And another person said that we should have more spaces like this, you know, because writing can be very, very lonely. So just having either online due to COVID, or, you know, hopefully in the future in-person spaces where we can talk and vent and discuss would be really, really useful. Someone else said that we should have more South Asian women in positions of power. I would add to that, I think it's really important that those South Asian women have the right sort of politics, because you don't want someone like Priti Patel, you know, at the head of a theatre company, because, you know, she's not going to put your play on because she's, you know, it's a lot to do with how you think rather than just what you look like, but also what you look like is very important too. Someone else mentioned that they would love to be an advocate for Carly and put forward the stuff that we're producing. Someone else mentioned how it's really important to have dramaturgs of colour. So when your work is, you know, put through the mill, you have someone who understands the cultural context the play is written in, and not someone who would say, oh, that wouldn't happen, or that character, you know, wouldn't say that. And finally, we talked about setting up a writers group to support and nurture South Asian female writers.
Amazing. Thank you, Athea.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Athea. I think I'm not going to comment on each one because it's all going to go into the report, but that just sounds so rich and fruitful, what you've come up with there. I mean, absolutely I'm thrilled to hear all those different ideas. So be absolutely rest assured it will all go into this report, so it will be heard, and we will share that with everyone. So I gather that we've lost Artie in running your own theatre company briefly, so we'll maybe move on now to Imtiaz Hussain, who is reporting back from room 3 discussing class and caste. Thank you, Imtiaz.
Thank you, Helena. So the title of the room was Visible or Invisible Working Class and Lower Caste South Asian Women Amidst the UK Theatre Landscape. We had 2 sort of provocation questions that, you know, I put forward, which was, what obstacles are there for working class, low caste South Asian women making work in theatre? what safeguards, support or considerations would help artists overcome these obstacles. So we had quite a lively and spirited discussion and ran out of time, you know, as we would do. But I think essentially what came out really from there was how fractured we are in theatre and how we really need the solidarity, and how people have loved coming together and talking, really similar to what Athia just said about we need those groups because that's what helps us all, and we felt that everybody, I think most of the room felt that's important to say. There was also the point that what's been already raised within the symposium, the discussions, is what everybody's struggling with. However, it may be amplified for working class artists because who are particularly unserved within the theatre world. So we had these sort of recommendations that we kind of sort of agreed on, which was mentoring. If you're coming to entry point, you know, it can be quite isolating, and so mentoring would be good. And in terms of career progression, you know, and somebody to sort of talk to and discuss and give you time and sort of, you know, your second, third and sustain a career in how to, you know, so mentoring seems really important for everybody, and also particularly for working class. I don't feel theatres for them. Accessibility, outreach programs to reach into unserved, marginalised communities. How, if you don't come from a family that knows what theatre is, to be able to let, you know, reach, sort of have that kind of outreach and accessibility. And then third, and probably one of the most important, is again the funding to cover basics such as travel, childcare, sustenance, you know, to be able to even participate, and reduce ticket prices for shows. That was raised as well at some point. So we have those three recommendations, sort of mentoring for career progression specifically, accessibility and funding. But essentially we just are all craving solidarity in this fractured world of theatre and generally where we are at the moment. So that's those, yeah. I hope that's all right, guys.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Yes, it does feel like we need to come together, and it's been brilliant coming together today. That's all excellent. Thank you. So moving on to, thank you, Imtiaz, and your room. Moving on to Iman Qureshi next, reporting back from the Triple Jump, Demarginalising Queer Brown Women in Theatre. Thank you, Iman.
Hello.
Hi.
So this has been fantastically inspiring. Thank you everyone for your contributions so far. As Helena said, our breakout room was about demarginalising queer brown women in theatre, because not only are we women, we're brown women, and on top of that we're queer, and so we often find ourselves in the sort of furthest corners. And we talked a lot about loneliness and isolation and the need for a community and the lack of that community, and how that became even more pronounced when you sort of move out of London, sort of regionally up north particularly. And we, similar to MTRs, we talked about the obstacles for queer South Asian women making work in theatre, and what safeguard support or considerations would help queer South Asian women overcome those obstacles. And one of the main obstacles seemed to be about being out as a queer person in the industry, and what that meant, because, you know, not only does the industry not want to hear our stories or want to hear from us, our families and our communities don't always want to hear from us and don't always want us to be sort of out, and they don't always support us. So how can we be out and make queer work in a safe way, in a way that suits us? And so we came up with 3 recommendations. The first being, because often we find that we don't know who else is out there. It can be a really sort of lonely experience being queer and brown. And so we thought a sort of private online community forum could help us connect with other artists and know who's out there, to share any concerns, to share work, to share contacts, and basically just have a community, and that should exist online so that people across the country can participate. Secondly, we thought that there just isn't enough work out there. So we need real, funding and support from venues in place to showcase our work and be visible. However, that needs to also be led with us in mind, because what may be okay for one person being out and sort of named as part of a queer showcase or scratch night might not be okay for another person. So what is it that each individual participating needs? Is it, control over the marketing copy? Is it, using sort of euphemisms or pseudonyms to kind of, conceal that sort of queerness in a way, and allowing those people who feel safe to be sort of openly queer to sort of take that platform, because we all agreed that visibility is also important and empowering. So yes, we needed a platform to make and showcase queer brown work. And finally, our last recommendation was, again, riffing off this theme of like a lack of community and a lack of being with each other. We really wanted a residential retreat for writers or artists to come together, something like the Arvon retreats or Hawkmoor, I think is another one. And those physical spaces that we can gather and be with each other and talk about making the work and create that work. Even just in our breakout room, there was a lot of emotion about being in a room with each other and seeing each other's faces and our queerness and what that meant. And that's really powerful and empowering for us. But thank you very much for your time, and I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Brilliant. Thank you, Iman. It's interesting that the theme keeps coming back to people coming together as groups. That is really fascinating, and I can't wait to sort of see this all down in writing, because I feel that Carly could, hopefully action so many of these recommendations. I hope so for the future. But those are all excellent. Thank you so much, and to your room. Brilliant. So moving on to room 5, we are with Renu Aurora and Disability. And Renu, if you can give us your full title, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Of course. Thanks, Helena. So hi, I'm Renu Aurora, and the title of our breakout room was Disabled, Female and an Artist, Is It Possible to Flourish? So we had a very sort of intimate conversation about what it means to be disabled and how we might be able to amplify our voices within the industry. And I shared some of my experience too as a disabled writer and artist. And we came up with various themes, and space was one of them, and I'll talk about that in a second. But one of the actions we came up with was having a disability arts advocate available for both theatre companies and venues, and there could be sort of one person available for each region or even for each theatre. If the theatre is big enough and can obviously afford to have one, there could be, for example, one disability arts advocate officer for example, Tara, Carly and Tamasha, just to be there to point disabled writers and artists in the direction of where to get support available. Maybe it's Arts Council funding, maybe it's access to work funding, which I have, which has been a lifesaver for me. Some of the campaigns that are available, some of the mentorship schemes that are available, so that disabled writers, there's one step removed to them flourishing and overcoming the barriers that they might feel are preventing them being on an even keel to some of their non-disabled artists. So we thought that, and we also thought another one could be having a mentorship scheme available sort of around the country, again, perhaps attached to some of the theatre companies that are BME-led theatre companies that are out there, so that people can feel a sense of, can feel like their voices are being amplified and people are helping them at any stage of their career, whether they're student level, whether they're just whether they're graduates, whether they've been working for 20 years and have had a disability later on in life, like myself, someone to point them in the direction of not just where to go, but how to help them to flourish with the barriers that they've got at the moment. And the last thing we thought was having a space within each project or organisation whereby this, because this was a theme that kept coming up, having space to explore what disability means and what it means to them and their experience of it, either personally or through family members, as a kind of a nutrient for exploring change, exploring work and putting into their work. So we thought we could, maybe each project and organisation could perhaps have a bit of space that's deliberately carved out within a project that stays ring-fenced for those kind of explorations and those ideas, so people can really explore what disability is. Perhaps they've got family members who are disabled and they want to explore that, and that we thought would be a lovely way to enrich the conversations that are happening, to enrich the work that then comes out of those explorations.
Thank you, Benu. Brilliant. Again, this idea of a mentor who could work across companies and across regions, I just think is such a brilliant idea. And again, as are all the other suggestions that you've made, but that one in particular pings out because I think that would be achievable quite quickly, potentially. Thank you. Very brilliant natural thinking. Thank you, Benu. So moving on now to Aileen Gonzalez and her drama schools and training room. Aileen, welcome.
Hi, Helena. Lovely to see you all. Yeah, so we had a fantastic chat. We had some very interesting people in our room who had been in the industry a long time. We all sort of looked at each other and recognised each other from many years. It was lovely to see each other. And we got onto this subject of, drama schools are the future. They are the future people that are going into the industry. And we had some very interesting talks about the links that theatre companies can make with the drama schools. Kamika was with us from New Earth company, and Carly itself, I know, has done stuff. I did some stuff with Carly about trying to help people audition for drama schools from different backgrounds that don't get that access so easily. So we're saying that that's something that perhaps at foundation stage or even in the main stages of drama school training, that theatre companies who are experts and are specific and specialised theatre companies could make their way into drama schools. Maybe they become a resident company, not just in drama schools, actually. We had a wider conversation about in theatre companies. That theatre companies that are specific, like Carly, would go and do a residency in a bigger theatre company, a more sort of established theatre company, or in a drama school, just so that you've got more brown faces, more different faces in the building. First of all, has a huge impact. I've worked in drama schools for years, and actually just that has a huge impact. So that was something that we thought of. And to help with auditions, people auditioning for drama schools, because that can be a real barrier to find a way into that auditioning stage of trying to find that link and make it a bit safer to do those auditions. The other thing we got into talking about was schools, because of course going into drama schools, who are going into the drama schools? Is it school education? And we really had a good chat about saying, what's happening with school education is obviously frightening for all of us, because all of us probably on this call found our way to this wonderful world that we're in through our school education. So how do we manage that? We were lucky, we managed to get a good teacher. It's sort of saying, is there something again that theatre companies, again like Carly and New Earth and the companies that are specialists in these areas, to go into schools, and that the drama schools need to go into schools? So that there's a real link now coming all the way up from school and saying this is a potential and viable career. And particularly actually looking at backstage. We sort of got into the conversation about stage management, producers, company managers. I don't know how you all find it, but finding people in the technical departments from these backgrounds is actually particularly difficult. And that perspective and point of view of those people from those backgrounds is really, really interesting for everything, of course, with diversity, but especially in areas like design and lighting design, sound design. There's so much to be offered from people who've got a different perspective. But saying, again, that road in is not so clear. But again, if you had people who are coming from a theatre company and saying, this is what we do, we've made a career of this, because all of us on the call when we speak, we've made a career. We have made careers. We were talking very established. I've been in the business 30 years, and you're saying, wait a sec, there is a career to be had, actually. It's quite inspiring to say there is a future, there is a life in this crazy business. To sort of give role models, I think is an important thing we said. And then back to the drama schools, really looking at broadening the curriculum. The drama schools, particularly this year, are now scared. And in a good way, they've woken up, but they actually don't know what to do. You know, the Black Lives Matter movement has gone through all of the drama schools. It's sent a whirlwind through them, shaken up everybody. But where are the things going to lie once the shaking is over? You know, so it's about trying to influence and inspire and encouraging broadening the curriculum to sort of ensure that actually the skills being taught there are transferable and applicable to bigger community things. You know, they're very rarefied, the skills in drama school, they have been, and the texts obviously that are chosen and the curriculum that everyone's following, that's all being looked at. This is the moment to grab, because this is the moment of change. So I think the influence now that people like Carly can have, individually, all of us in fact can have, but particularly in the drama schools, by saying, because they're open to it. And I've never seen them so open. I'm on lots of drama schools. I wander in and out of meetings on these Zoom calls. Very different thing going on, very different conversation. Everybody wanting to be open. But actually, I really think there is a voice now for us to speak to them because they want to hear now some solutions. So to give some solutions about looking at ways of getting into those communities and hearing from those different voices. And we had some interesting conversations about how do you do plays when you've got, you know, people of different languages now, different colours. Are you going to do blackface? Are you going to do yellowface? You know, is that going to cause a nightmare? You know, this whole kind of trauma around that the students are absolutely vocal about and the teachers are not knowing what to do anything about. And we have to have these difficult conversations now. But drama schools are a safe space now in order to have them. And hopefully those conversations will lead into the industry. Thank you, Helena.
Wow, gosh, what an amazingly rich series of conversations you've had there. Well, I will say, here's for the drama schools. But I mean, it's aimed at that. But I mean, so fascinating. Your experience, Aileen, to see, you know, you've been in the industry for 30 years, to see the changes as you've identified those. So we certainly need to hear much more from you in the future. And as you know, we've started on these steps with the summer schools. So, you know, exactly all of that. But that's brilliant. What brilliant recommendations. Fantastic. Again, can't wait to get this report. It's brilliant. Super. Thank you so much. And so Aileen, leaving you now and going to Aisha Khan to report back on dramaturgy and literary management. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I hope you can hear me. Yes. So in our group, we were exploring what the barriers are that South Asian female writers face. And in particular, I asked the question, what do we need to do to support our South Asian female writers to be able to be creative and productive? We were very short of time. The conversations were really interesting. And I think what we've got are 3 questions which will hopefully go some way to extending that conversation around dramaturgy and writers, especially in relation to South Asian female writers. So the first question that we've got here is, what is a specificity or pathway needed for South Asian women writers in getting their voices heard and their work seen, moving from smaller commissions through to main stage productions? So that's the first question that came up. The second one was, how do we listen to our writers in order to create the work the writers want to write? So how as dramaturgs can we support our writers to make their story come to life? And the final point we've got is time. New writers need time to develop. How can we provide this in a meaningful, productive and supportive way as we move forward? So that's kind of the questions that we had. There was lots of conversation, discussion, but I felt as a group that these questions will help us as we move forward, looking at dramaturgy and South Asian female writers and the stories that they want to tell and how we can be most helpful in visualising and creating that for them together.
Amazing. Excellent. Thank you. I mean, as you know, this is, of course, so close to Carly's heart because we work in new writing and we don't have very many South Asian dramaturgs. And as you know, we're wanting to try and look at developing that strand in the future and training women in that. So all of this will feed into that training programme and those ideas for that training programme brilliantly. Thank you so much. Wonderful. See you later, and thank you, Aisha. And so now we're moving on to Shubha Das with writers, so talking about writers, producers and programmers. Thanks, Shubha.
Hello, hi.
Hi.
Doing the scores at Eurovision. I'm excited to report back from our nation. So just framing the conversation that we had was just an actually really specific reflection on this moment that we're in, and what the pandemic has meant and the way that has disrupted traditional relationships between the artist and the structure, which is how I referred to this kind of combination of producers and programmers. And that actually things that were shared with us were what it's meant, for instance, to be on a Zoom with 60 other working class artists for the first time, what it's meant to be able to access work at low cost, and that the breadth of that provision. So there's some considerations around all of this that we'd like to take forwards as things to hold on to, because this is a real moment of shift and we are in a conversation about how we build back better. So the key themes that emerged, shared across many of the responses we've heard already, but listening actually as the real beating heart of a positive relationship between a writer and a producer or a programmer, and understanding what generates the best quality of listening. And this of course feeds into the diversity of team, and you've just said there, how do we develop more South Asian dramaturgs, but actually also design, actors, the voices around the work to enable the best quality listening, to enable the work to fulfill its full potential. Of course, this reflects what we've heard earlier today about this idea that South Asian female work needs to not be interpreted through this kind of centered white, often male gaze, otherwise it will be reduced and diminished. How can we actually ensure that those structures exist? That idea of listening led quite organically to a consideration of networks, and this also reflects what's been possible in the context of the pandemic, that writers, artists have found independent connections with each other, not brokered by venues. And how do we hold on to that and drive that forwards? Because actually this sense of community is what enables us to grow and to work better. Transparency arose as a further theme, talking about networks. What is the information that we feel like programmers, producers, venues are holding on to that is not made publicly or more widely accessible? That's both in terms of other artists, other creatives within a community or nationally who could be supporting the development of an individual's work, but also transparency around the structures that inform programmers and producers. A recurrent thread was this idea that artists are often infantilized by these structures, and none of the artists I was talking to are children. We want to know who's funding you, what boxes you're having to tick, etc. That's actually empowering to the individual artist. So why aren't programmers and producers making more concrete steps around making that clear so that artists understand the framework that they're operating within? That leads to another provocation, which was about quotas, and whether actually the greatest kind of transparency we could generate is to rigorously expect and require that especially subsidised organisations are really on the front foot about quotas and measurements as a way of being held to account. And there was a shared belief in the room that could actually be ultimately, and perhaps it's dispiriting and I know it triggers other conversations, but a way of really actually pushing that dial further on. Finally, then also just a kind of consideration from artists that and writers that they are aware that venues, producers, programmers may not be able to offer that commission, may not be able to fully stage a show, but actually that is the sum total of what a writer wants. And this comes back to this issue of transparency, because there are other resources available within the context of a producing or programming entity. And how can venues be more equitable in how they share access to that? There are actors in those buildings, there are technicians in those buildings, there are other creatives available. Are there ways to unlock access access to that talent that supports the development of the writer's journey without it being this very loaded thing, this suspicion that can exist between the venue and the artist, which is, you're coming here because you want a big production and we're scared of spending that much cash. Actually, again, it comes back to this infantilization point. Treat the artist as a partner and as an equal in that conversation, and understand that actually they may not be approaching you with what you might refer to as that naivety.
Gosh, amazing. That sounds so useful, and the transparency issue in that seems to kind of span across all the points that you've made, really. It's really interesting. Wow, I can't wait for that to be discussed further. Thank you, Shubha, brilliant. Thank you so much, and your team. Fantastic. Right, so moving on now to room 9 and Pamela Vision, accessing development funding. So Pam is our colleague's relationship manager at the Arts Council. So looking forward very much to hearing what she's going to come back with the recommendations on this. Thank you, Pam.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, can you hear me? So we ran out of time and didn't quite get round to recommendations for the sector. But what we did do, there was a small group. There was just 2 artists. One worked for an organization and one was a writer. So it was quite an interesting discussion about where the support lies and then where the organizations can find the artists that they're looking for. And so what there was between us was a sort of discussion about how best to access the support that is around. And so these are some of the ideas that we came up with. One of them is to get to know your local space wherever you are based. And it would seem that London is a place that has a lot of specialist organizations. And so if you are a writer or interested in physical theatre, or depending on what your specialism is, you will probably find an organization that really coalesces artists around that. Outside of London, the organizations tend to be much more generalist because there are fewer of them. And what they have got is a really great network across cities and to some of the London specialists. And it's not just London, this also happens in other parts of the country, but as a rule. So it's a really good idea for you to find and make contact with your local organization or your local specialist organization and be able to start to access those networks, because the producers within those networks also talk to each other and try and support people between themselves. And I would say also as a really good suggestion, provocation to the sector, that we really continue to build those networks, because I think they're really important. The person who worked for the organization said that something that would help them very much in being able to access artists and give them what they need is to really hear from artists what they want. So obviously organizations get emails all the time from people wanting support and time and space and commissions. And what really helps is a really clear ask. And then they're able to respond very quickly and very clearly to what they can give. It also is useful when artists give producers, organizations, the Arts Council, enough time to be able to give the support that they need. So often there's a real time limit. They ask for letters of support within a day or two, or they come to me a lot of the time with the Arts Council and say, we have a question, but we need to know tomorrow. The more time that you can give people, the more supportive they can be. Another suggestion was trying to do work without having to kind of wait for infrastructure to come to you, and instead to try and find a small group of collaborators that can help to just produce the work. And then that's at a point when it's a really good idea to come to the Arts Council with ideas and a structure and a support that you want to move forward. And then also that helps theatres, art centres to be able to program, because the work is kind of happening anyway. That was mostly what we talked about.
That's brilliant. I think that clear ask is just such a good pointer, because I think and maybe that's where companies like Carly can help to identify what a clear ask would be before artists even go in, perhaps, I don't know, and then the specialist organisations. That all sounds really, really useful. Thank you so much. And we're about to go on to running a company with Artie if she's back now. So what you've just finished off on exactly the right point. So thank you, Pam. Brilliant. Wonderful. Thank you. And so now, Artie, are you there?
I am here.
Hey.
Yes, I am. Sorry.
So, brilliant. So can you conclude the breakout rooms then with your room, which was running your own company? Thank you.
Yeah, I sure can. So we didn't really talk about running your own company. It was a very intimate little group. And I really explained what my background was, and that is that I work in participation, and that's been my career, community and participation. And my question really was, I was intrigued that not many South Asian creatives are coming into that area or sustaining it as a career in that area, actually. So that would be my little plug there. Why are not more people working in that area? But what we got to talking about, really, I think generally, was that I was feeling that actually that there has been an explosion of a lot of younger creatives coming through. We've seen that. We're seeing that now. We're experiencing that. But however, they're not making it through into perhaps organizations or buildings or things like that. So although we're seeing that explosion, it's not happening. And so I guess some of the things that I'm going to suggest are really, this is aimed at kind of the organizations or the venues, that actually when you're nurturing talent, that you give it time and that you enable the craft to develop. And so you encourage support and you encourage people to take risks. That would be one of the things. The other thing that it was a huge ask, and there was quite a conversation around this actually, is that to be able to have the agency, to be able to take organizations and put them to account. And so that you're asking for transparency. I guess it kind of alludes to a little bit of what Subhadas was saying as well, actually. But that seems to me like quite critical at the moment, that thing of like, where is the accountability and where is the transparency in what people are being asked to do? And I think, sorry, was that someone? And behind all of that is also that actually that the intention of any program or project is very clear, and that you're being very specific of why you're doing that project and why is it that you're asking perhaps South Asian artists or people of colour to come into this project or into the building or into your organisation. So those are where kind of I think the debate and the discussion was around, really. And, a huge issue around accessibility as well, I think that's where I would leave it.
Fantastic, brilliant. It's interesting, it echoes so many things from other groups as well. So there's clearly a thread here, like you say, the transparency. It's interesting about the community arts.
Yes.
You covered there though, isn't it? That's really interesting.
There's a big gap there, I would say, a huge gap.
So that's a big question that I think, it'd be interesting to try and answer or to try and look at some point when the report comes out. So thank you, Artie. Brilliant. So pleased to have that. Thank you. So, well, wow, thank you all so much. And sorry that we haven't had time to pull out more from all this amazing discussion that you've had. But I'm hoping that once we get the report, we'll be able to also have some more legacy projects that emerge from this. Anyway, it's now time for me to leave you and to pass over to Alison McFadden, who is Carly's chair of board, and she is going to do some closing remarks for today's symposium. But thank you all so much from me, and over to Alison. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Helena. I know it's terribly tempting for everybody to hit the leave button. You're all zoomed out and you think it was only the closing remarks, but I promise I will only talk for a couple of minutes. I think that's been a fantastic afternoon. Well done, Helena. Well done to everybody involved. Rita and Rukhsana, did you think that you had started something so amazing 30 years ago? Did you actually think that 30 years later we would be in a symposium, a virtual symposium, talking about Kali? It's still relevant, still giving voice to so many writers. It was fantastic also, I think, to hear from Janet earlier on. Janet was such a big part of Kali for 15 years, and it was great to hear from her and others. From my point of view, I think it's been wonderful to be part of a symposium that celebrates not just the past, but is also very much about looking forward. You know, what are the next 30 years of Kali going to be all about? I've actually found myself, and I didn't expect this, to be strangely emotional this afternoon. Just listening to such amazing women and reflecting on what's been achieved by all of you and by others over the last 30 years. And the writers, I mean, Kali is just so proud of all of the writers, each and every one of you, so thank you. But this isn't about just this one event, and it's not just about the past. It's also about, I think, really what happens next. Helena, I think, is adamant that we want to take the fantastic thinking that you've done in the breakout groups. It sounds like really rich content. We are determined that we're going to take that forward. Really rich feedback. There will be a report coming out from this symposium, which Helena has mentioned. And I know that we'll be doing a number of things like writing to venues with ideas. And please remember the book, which is also a fantastic resource. And thank you to the one person, I think, who has already this afternoon used the code to buy the book from the Kali script shop. Just as a reminder, the code is shoulders in capital letters. We would love your feedback on what you thought of today. You can email us via the contact page, or you can respond to the email that you received with details of this event. I think a number of you will be interested in the recording of today. That should be on the Kali website from tomorrow, so please do share that with anybody you think will be interested in this event. But finally, and on behalf of everybody, I just want to say a few thank yous. Thank you very much to all of the speakers today, the panel chairs, the breakout room facilitators, the repetitors. Thanks to the advisory panel of Isabel Horson, Rukhsana Ahmed and Jocelyn Watson. Thanks to Laura and Rada from the Central School, to the technical team at Tel Media, two people who have worked incredibly hard this afternoon, the BSL interpreters Linda and Kasha. Huge thanks to Naomi and Chris, Team Kali, for your huge hard work in preparing and delivering today. And obviously a massive thanks to Helena, our artistic director, who has really been the driving force of this event. So, and congratulations, Helena. I think you've done a fantastic job. Brilliant. Thank you to everybody who has joined us and taken part in today. It's really been hugely rich, hugely enjoyable. And I think it just remains for me to say goodbye, but also to wish Kali an extremely happy 30th birthday. Thank you very much, everybody.